Hi, I'm Celine. My sister got a brand new house for graduation. Me, I got an envelope with her dead inside. But that was just the beginning. They used our childhood home behind my back, erased me from family photos, and called me selfish when I finally spoke up. Ever been the strong one in the family until it cost you everything you need to hear this story? It doesn't end the way they thought it would. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell. Because family secrets don't stay buried forever. They celebrated one daughter and cashed in on the other. I remember gripping the steering wheel tighter than I should have. The cool night air filtered through the half-cracked window of my car as I pulled out of the driveway headlights, casting long shadows across the trimmed hedges that used to feel like home. My chest burned, not with rage, but something quieter, something lonelier. I didn't go straight home. I drove around Boise aimlessly for a while, letting the familiar streets blur past like static. Downtown was still lively. Young couples out on late dinners, students clinking glasses in rooftop bars. I stopped at a red light near 6th and Main and just sat there even after it turned green. I didn't cry, I just sat. Eventually, I ended up in the parking lot of a 24-hour grocery store. I wasn't hungry, but I walked inside anyway, wandered the aisles as if purpose might appear between the cereal boxes. I stood still for a moment in the cleaning supplies aisle and stared at a bottle of Windex until a voice behind me said, "You okay, hun?" It was a store clerk, middle-aged, tired eyes, but kind. I blinked, nodded once, then walked out without buying anything. By the time I got back to my apartment, it was past midnight. I kicked off my shoes, shrugged off my jacket, and dropped the envelope on the kitchen counter like it was something toxic. That ridiculous sticky note still clung to it, cheerful in its ignorance. "You've always been the responsible one." They said that like it was a compliment. Like being dependable meant I didn't deserve celebration-only service. Like I was the utility daughter. The one they could always tap when Lyra failed upward. I changed into my pajamas, then collapsed onto the couch, staring at the ceiling fan whirring gently above. I thought about the way my mother beamed when she announced the house gift. Her eyes had shimmered. Her voice had cracked with pride. For Lyra. Not for both of us. Not even a mention of me. Just Lyra. And then the envelope. No hug. No "we're proud of you." Just a spreadsheet of debts and an expectation that I'd pay them off. I guess Myra and Halden figured I'd smile, say of course, and take care of it like always. I reached for my phone and opened a blank notes page. My fingers hovered, then started typing. Graduated with honors, built my business from scratch, paid my own rent since 19, never missed a birthday, never caused a scene, never asked for anything. But none of that ever counted, did it? I locked my phone and set it face down. I wasn't angry. I was hollowed out, like someone had quietly unstitched the seams of everything I thought my family was. My doorbell buzz suddenly jarring me. I looked at the time. 12:43 a.m. I peeked through the peephole. No one. But there, resting against the doorframe, was a takeout bag with my name scribbled on the side. Thai food. From the place I liked. No note. Lyra. It had to be her. She was the only one who knew I ordered pad see ew when I needed comfort. I didn't touch it. I brought it inside, but I left it sealed on the counter. I didn't owe her comfort. Not tonight. I sat at the kitchen table, flicked on the overhead light, and stared down at that envelope again. The numbers blurred. 48,000 in total, all in Lyra's name. But they thought my name would clean it up. Just help your sister out a little. That's what Mira had said, like I was some walking trust fund. I scoffed aloud and muttered, "You've got to be kidding me," before pushing the envelope into a drawer and slamming it shut. I didn't know what I was going to do next, but I knew one thing. If they expected me to go down quietly, they had underestimated the daughter they ignored for far too long. But somehow I did. Not home, not really. I parked outside, sat in the car until my mother texted me. "Come in, I made breakfast." I stared at the message for a while before I moved, not because I was touched, but because I was too drained to argue with politeness. I walked up the path slowly, each step heavier than the last. The porch light was still on, though it was already morning. That alone told me how much of the night they'd spent pretending nothing had happened. The front door was unlocked. The scent of pancakes and maple syrup hit me as I stepped inside. I used to love that smell when I was a kid. Now it just made my stomach tighten. Mira looked up from the kitchen island and gave me a wide smile, like nothing at all was off. "Good morning, sweetheart," she said lightly. "I was hoping you'd come back." I forced a nod and hung my keys on the hook by the door. Everything in the house was just as I remembered it. The neatness, the soft jazz humming in the background, the bowl of fruit that was always more decoration than food. But something was off, or maybe I was. I didn't feel like I belonged in that chair at the breakfast bar anymore. She set a plate in front of me stacked high with pancakes and slid into the seat across from mine with her mug in hand. "You've always been the strong one, the steady one," she said, sipping her tea like we were sharing a sweet mother-daughter moment. "We never had to worry about you." I didn't respond. She didn't notice. "Lyra needs this time to feel supported," she went on, reaching for a napkin. "She's never had your independence. You know how emotional she gets. She's not built like you." I stared at my plate. The syrup was beginning to soak through the bottom pancake, but I hadn't touched a bite. I wasn't hungry. I wasn't sure I'd be able to taste anything, even if I was. Was this supposed to make me feel better? That I was too strong to deserve help? Was I supposed to feel flattered that my self-sufficiency had disqualified me from being celebrated? I nodded slowly, not because I agreed, but because it was easier than opening the floodgates. After breakfast, I stepped outside to the small patio, pretending I needed air. I leaned on the railing and watched a bird hop across the fence. My fingers tightened around the ceramic mug in my hand. I felt like I was suffocating under all the invisible things they thought I could carry. Lyra crashed the car in high school. I gave up my summer job savings to help pay for repairs. She failed a college class, and I picked up tutoring gigs to help offset her living expenses. I remembered our mom saying back then, "You're so good with money, she's just not like you." No one ever asked how it felt. No one ever thanked me. Now it wasn't about a car or groceries or rent. It was a house, an entire house, gifted to Lyra, while I was handed her debt like a party favor. All because I had the nerve to be responsible. Back inside, I wandered toward the guest bathroom to wash my hands. As I neared the hallway, I heard Myra's voice. She was on the phone, door cracked just slightly. "She'll be fine," she said with the kind of breezy certainty that only someone without consequences can afford. "She always is, but Lyra needs this. She needs to feel she matters." There was a pause. My mother sighed. "No, I don't think Selene minds. She's never cared about things like this." I didn't move. I didn't breathe. My back pressed against the wall, steadying me. That was it. That was the story they told themselves to sleep at night. That I was immune to being overlooked. That, because I didn't scream or break things or cry on cue, I didn't feel. I wasn't crying now either. But something inside me had shifted, like the first groan of a frozen lake about to crack. Later that night, I lay in the guest room staring at the ceiling fan. The room still had the old bookshelf I used as a teenager, the one with my initials carved into the corner of the wood. A relic of someone who once thought effort was enough to be noticed. Maybe that was the problem. Maybe I'd spent my whole life thinking, if I kept being good, kept being helpful, they'd eventually see me. But they didn't want to see me. They wanted someone they didn't have to worry about. Someone who would smile and say, "I understand," while they gave the world to someone else. And maybe I'd been letting them. Why is it always me? Why is my success treated like a cushion instead of an accomplishment? The question looped in my mind as I rinsed out my coffee mug and stared blankly at the kitchen sink. I hadn't slept much, but I'd stopped expecting rest to come easy in this house. Every room carried a weight, a quiet reminder that I was the reliable one. And in this family, reliable meant invisible. I skipped breakfast. I didn't want another plate of sugar-laced affection, followed by more rationalizations about why I didn't need to be seen, heard, or celebrated. Instead, I texted Aunt Thalia. "Can we meet just the two of us? I need a little air." Her reply came almost instantly. "Of course. The cafe on Vista, I'll be there." By mid-afternoon, I was sitting across from her at a small table tucked near the back of a quiet cafe in Boise. The kind of place where no one asked questions, and the coffee came strong and cheap. Thalia looked up from her tea as I walked in her brow knit in that signature maternal worry that always made me feel like I still mattered to someone. "I was hoping you'd reach out," she said, gently patting the seat across from her. "You okay?" I didn't answer right away. I wasn't even sure how to describe the ache I carried. I just sat down, let the warmth of the mug in my hands distract me, and nodded. Thalia didn't push. She never did. She just waited, sipping slowly, giving me the room to speak. But then she leaned in slightly, her voice lowering. "I wanted to ask you something, but only if you're ready." I met her eyes. "Go ahead." She hesitated. "Did you really tell Mira and Halden that you were planning to move out of state?" My spine straightened like a pulled wire. What Thalia looked surprised at my reaction. "They told me you were leaving Boise, that you didn't want to live near them anymore. That's why supposedly they felt better giving Lyra the house." The air between us went still. I never said that, I said flatly. Not once. "I thought it sounded off," Thalia said quietly. "I know you've always talked about putting down roots here, buying something local, even looking into investment properties." The words rattled inside me like a shaken snow globe. So that was it. That's how they justified the decision. It wasn't just favoritism, it was fiction. I tried to process it, but something sharper than confusion cut through me. Betrayal. I knew Lyra could be selfish, manipulative when it suited her. But this was deliberate. This wasn't just getting more help. It was stepping over me with a smile and a story. And they believed her, without question. "I didn't know," Thalia said gently, seeing my silence. "I thought you did. I thought you'd changed your mind and just hadn't told me yet." I shook my head slowly, setting down my coffee. My hands were trembling. Flashbacks started to creep in. Quiet moments I'd buried under years of rationalizations. Lyra totaling her car senior year, and my parents quietly asking if I could lend her the money to help with repairs. I drained my savings without a second thought. I was 19, turning down a career-launching internship in Portland because someone needed to watch Lyra's kids for a week, just until things settled down. Spending Christmas alone in a studio apartment while the family took Lyra and her boyfriend to Aspen. Mira had texted me, "You understand, right? She's had such a hard year. Always a reason, always an excuse, and always at my expense." I had built a life out of being available, for favors, for silence, for sacrifice, but never for celebration. I looked back at Thalia. She lied, I said, my voice barely above a whisper, and they believed her. Her expression softened. "Celine, I'm so sorry." I nodded, swallowing back the rise in my throat. But it wasn't grief that bloomed inside me this time. It was something darker, sharper. When we parted ways, I told her I needed to walk. The sky had turned pale gray, a soft drizzle starting to fall. I didn't mind. The cold rain matched the strange clarity setting in. Each step home felt heavier, like I was shedding illusions with every block. I wasn't just hurt. I was furious, not the screaming kind, the quiet, calculating kind, the kind that plans, the kind that remembers. My sister lied. My parents didn't ask. And I let it happen, over and over again. But something had changed now. I unlocked my apartment door, tossed my wet jacket on the back of a chair, and stared at the unopened envelope still sitting in the kitchen drawer. Lyra's debt. My burden. Not anymore. Mira had texted 2 days after the party inviting us all to dinner. She called it a little family reset. I didn't reply at first. I wasn't ready. But something inside me knew I had to go. Not to pretend everything was fine, but because I needed to stop pretending it didn't matter. By 6:30, I pulled into the driveway. The sky was streaked in faded lavender, the last hints of daylight casting long shadows on the front lawn. From outside, the house looked peaceful, almost picturesque. But I knew what waited inside wasn't peace. It was a performance. The front door was already cracked open when I walked in. Mira had lit the candles on the dining table. Halden was at the grill humming as if he hadn't watched his wife hand one daughter a house and the other a spreadsheet of someone else's debts. Lyra sat on the couch, scrolling through her phone, not even looking up. I washed my hands at the kitchen sink and sat down at the table. My heart beat slow but heavy. The plates were already set. Salmon roasted potato salad dressed in that lemon vinaigrette my mom always made when she wanted to impress someone. It all looked normal, too normal, and I was done with normal. Halfway through the meal, as Mira reached across the table to pour more wine into Lyra's glass, I said it. I want to know why my success is always treated like an obligation. Silence. Mira blinked wine, still mid-pour. Excuse me? I kept my voice steady. Why does everything I earn come with a bill? Why do I work hard, save, build a business, and somehow it just makes me the automatic safety net? Mira placed the bottle down, her smile taut. Sweetheart, that's not fair. You've always been the strong one. We never had to worry about you. I met her gaze. That's the point. You never had to, but you did anyway. You turned my strength into your excuse. You're being dramatic, she snapped, her voice slicing through the candlelit air. You know your sisters had a harder time. You've always been the one who didn't mind stepping in. That's the thing, I said, eyes narrowing. I've always minded. I just didn't think I was allowed to say so. Lyra let out a breathy laugh, shaking her head. You always say you don't care about money, Celine. Isn't that your whole thing? Now suddenly you do. I care about being valued, I replied. And not just when someone needs something paid off. That's when Mira lost it. Oh, don't do this. Don't sit there and act like you've been mistreated. We've done everything for this family, and you just want attention now that your sister finally gets a moment. A moment? I asked, my voice rising. She got a house. She needed a home, Mira snapped. You already had stability. You're being selfish. You're bitter. That's what this is really about, isn't it? You can't stand not being the center for once. Each word felt like a hammer. I looked across the table, just hoping that Halden would say something. Anything. Dad? I asked, voice quieter now. You agree with this? He didn't even lift his head, just poked at his salmon and mumbled, Your mom means well. Let's not fight. That was it. That was all he had. No defense, no support, just avoidance. Served cold on a dinner plate. Something inside me shifted. It wasn't new pain. It was old pain now unmasked. The kind I had buried under responsibilities and birthdays and picking up the slack. I stood up. My napkin fell to the floor, but I didn't pick it up. You know what hurts the most? I said, my voice steady, despite the tremble I could feel building. That you think this is new? That you think this is about one house? You don't realize I've been swallowing this my whole life. Mira rolled her eyes. Here we go. No, I said, cutting her off. Here I go. Out. I stepped back from the table. No one moved. No one followed. The walls of my apartment were still bare, just cream-colored drywall and scuff marks from past tenants, but they held me in a way my parents' house never had. I sat in a folding chair near the window knees, tucked to my chest, sipping black coffee out of a chipped mug I'd had since college. There was no sofa, no table, no framed photos, but the silence was finally mine. I had only been there a few days, just enough time to realize that peace wasn't about perfection. It was about permission to breathe without bracing for the next favor someone expected me to fulfill. My phone buzzed from the countertop. I didn't recognize the number, but the message made my stomach clench. Hey, this is Ben. Remember me from Roosevelt High? I'm doing some title work on a house out in Rock Point and noticed something weird. Did your family sell off the deed to 1331 Willow Lane? My breath hitched. That was the address of our childhood home. The one with the cracked porch swing I used to sit on while doing homework. The same house I helped pay property taxes on during the recession. The home they promised would always stay in the family. I called Ben immediately. He picked up with a hesitant tone. Hey, sorry if that text was out of line, it's just... Your name popped into my head when I saw the address. Thought I should ask. What do you mean, sold off? I asked, heart thudding. Well, it looks like it was used as collateral. The original deed was placed under a temporary lien. It's tied to a new construction mortgage out in Rock Point. I didn't need to ask whose name was on that new house. It was Lyra's. I thanked him and hung up my fingers, already trembling, as I opened the county records portal. A few minutes later, I had the confirmation in front of me. The mortgage listed our family home as security, the same home I once asked to buy into, the same one I thought stupidly might be mine someday, and they hadn't even told me. My hands moved before my brain could catch up. I opened my text app and typed, "You mortgaged Willow Lane." Without telling me, it took only a few seconds for Myra to respond. You don't live there anymore, Celine. You said you were leaving. My jaw clenched so tight I could feel the tension ripple through my neck. That wasn't just dismissal. It was erasure. I wasn't just a daughter who had moved out. I was someone they'd edited out of the family ledger, and all for Lyra. I opened my laptop and began to type. The words came quickly, sharply, not out of spite, but out of finality. Subject: legal boundaries to Myra and Holden. Effective immediately. If either of you use my name, my credit, my savings, or my assumed availability for any financial matter, including but not limited to loans, mortgages, or emergency assistance, I will pursue legal counsel. This is not an emotional threat. It is a formal boundary. For years, I've been the strong one, the silent one, the reliable one. But I'm not your fallback plan. I'm not your walking checkbook. And I'm not afraid to defend my worth anymore. I have no interest in punishing anyone, but I will not allow this pattern to continue. Celine. I reread it once. Then I hit send. I didn't cry. I didn't pace the room or rehearse what-ifs. I just closed the laptop and leaned back in the chair. The hum of the fridge was the only sound. Later that night, I sat on the floor cross-legged beside my still unopened box of books. I ran my fingers along the tape, feeling the texture of independence, the sharp edge of choosing yourself, even when it means letting go of people who should have never made you choose. I had always believed that strength meant enduring. But maybe strength was actually saying enough. There was grief, of course. Not just for the lie. Not just for the house. But for the hope I'd carried for so long. That one day, they'd see me. That one day, I wouldn't have to explain why I mattered. I stood and walked to the window. The street was quiet, the kind of stillness that didn't ask anything from you. No conditions, no expectations, just quiet. For the first time in my adult life, I wasn't waiting for an apology. I wasn't begging to be understood. I was done being their secret safety net. And I wasn't sorry for stepping away. I thought the worst was behind me. But I'd underestimated how deep the damage really went. There's a strange kind of stillness that settles after you cut ties with people you were raised to believe would never hurt you. It's not peace exactly. It's more like the echo that follows a slammed door. Sharp echoing and eventually quiet. In the days after sending that email to my parents, I found myself writing. Journals, long text drafts. I never sent notes app entries titled, "Lessons from Being the Responsible One," and "Stop Explaining Your Worth." Sometimes I posted fragments online anonymously, not for attention, but because I needed the words to live somewhere outside my body. The silence was too heavy otherwise. One of the posts caught traction. Hundreds of likes, dozens of comments, strangers telling me I feel this. I've lived this. Thank you. It was the first time in weeks I didn't feel crazy. Then Thalia texted, "Your mom just told me to stay out of it." Then she hung up on me. I froze rereading her words. I called immediately straight to voicemail. Later that evening, while scrolling, I saw Mira's latest Facebook status. A public post, no names mentioned. But the message was unmistakable. Some people poison the well just because they weren't invited to drink from it. The caption read, "Let's not confuse bitterness with bravery." I felt something inside me calcify, so that was it. Aunt Thalia, who had only ever been kind, who had offered nothing more than empathy, was now exiled too. It clicked, suddenly and completely. Mira didn't manage conflict. She eliminated it. Anyone who deviated from her narrative was cast out. First me, now Thalia. I updated my anonymous post. If someone cuts you off for telling the truth, they were never listening in the first place. The comments flooded in again. People sharing stories of family members rewriting reality to protect their image. And I wasn't surprised. Control doesn't always come in the form of screaming matches or slammed fists. Sometimes it looks like carefully edited silence. The next day, I was making tea when my phone buzzed with a name I hadn't seen in a while. Lyra. I stared at it for a while before I opened it. Her message wasn't long, but it was unexpected. I didn't ask them to do all this. I just didn't know how to say no. A moment later, another one came through. "I'm not the favorite Celine. I'm just the excuse. I read it once, then twice, then again." My first instinct was disbelief. But it wasn't anger, not this time. Something softer, more complicated settled in. Because I recognized that feeling. We'd both been twisted into roles we never chose. Me, the capable one who didn't need anything. Her, the fragile one whose needs justified everything. I didn't respond right away. I didn't know what to say. Lyra wasn't blameless, but she was also caught in something bigger than us both. That didn't erase what she did, or what she benefited from. But it explained why she never stopped it. Maybe she thought if she didn't ask for the house, it wasn't her responsibility. Maybe I had done the same, pretending that if I didn't resist, I couldn't be blamed for the silence. I set my phone down and stared out the window. It wasn't forgiveness I felt, not yet, but I didn't hate her. And that surprised me more than anything. I'd drawn a line in the sand, and I wasn't stepping back. But for the first time, I wasn't focused on punishing anyone. I didn't want revenge. I didn't want them to hurt. I just wanted to stop hurting. Maybe that was the real rebellion in families like mine. Not breaking the silence with anger, but with truth. The front yard looked the same. Neatly mowed grass, the lavender bush trimmed back wind chimes still hanging from the porch. But the silence behind the front door felt heavier than usual. I stepped out of my car and walked toward the house slowly, as if it might vanish if I moved too quickly. My keys still fit. The lock turned with a soft click, and I stepped inside. No one was home. Mira and Halden must have been out. Lyra, too. I hadn't planned it that way, but I wasn't sorry either. I hadn't come to fight. I came to collect the last few things I'd left behind. A box of old books, my guitar, a coat I hadn't needed during summer, but didn't want to lose to winter's indifference. The scent of lemon cleaner still lingered. That used to mean safety, warmth. Mom cleaned today. Now it smelled sterile, like something polished too hard to cover what's rotting underneath. I crossed the hall toward the living room out of habit more than intent. That's when I saw it. The photo wall. It had been the same for as long as I could remember. Framed family portraits in staggered rows. Thanksgivings, Christmas mornings, school plays, graduations, my 5th grade spelling bee Lyra's first dance recital. Even that beach trip where I got stung by a jellyfish and Dad accidentally captured the exact moment I screamed. It had always been messy, but real. Lived in. Now it was curated. At first, I didn't understand what was wrong. The lighting was new. The frames matched. The layout was symmetrical. Then it hit me. I was gone. Every photo that had once featured me had either been replaced or cropped. One after another. Snapshots of a revised history. There was a new picture of Lyra in front of her house smiling, holding a key with Mira and Halden beaming behind her. A recent Christmas portrait I remembered clearly. I had been in the center arms around both parents. Now it was just the 3 of them, cropped cleanly, perfectly. Even my high school graduation picture, gone. I felt my fingers curl slowly, then relax. I stepped closer and stared at the wall. This wasn't forgetfulness. This wasn't accidental. This was a rewrite. They hadn't just cut me out emotionally. They were erasing proof I'd ever been part of this family at all. I didn't cry. My jaw clenched, but my eyes stayed dry. I reached up and carefully removed one frame, then another, and another. I didn't break them, didn't throw them, just took them down quietly, deliberately, and stacked them in a neat pile on the carpet. I turned each one face down, like closing the eyes of something long dead. Then I stood in the doorway for one last moment and whispered under my breath, "If I'm not in the story, I'm not staying in the room." I walked out without looking back. I didn't take the box of books. I didn't grab my coat. I left everything physical because what needed to be carried wasn't something that fit in a box. Back at my apartment, the air felt lighter, like the place had been waiting for me to return, with something finally severed. I kicked off my shoes, opened the fridge to grab a cold bottle of water, and noticed the small magnet photo still stuck to the corner. It was me at age 6, missing a front tooth, holding a popsicle, wearing a crooked sun hat. The photo was taped to a card from my grandmother, the only one in our family who ever made me feel seen. I removed it carefully and pinned it to the center of my fridge. I stared at it for a long time. "You didn't deserve that," I whispered to the little girl frozen in that picture, "and you don't have to carry it anymore." The words felt foreign, leaving my lips not weak, not angry, just truthful, like something overdue. For the rest of the evening, I didn't check my phone. I didn't scroll social media. I made dinner, folded laundry, swept the kitchen. For the first time in weeks, I didn't rehearse anything in my head. I knew exactly what needed to be said, but I was going to say it on my terms. Not in their kitchen, not under their roof. I had my own roof now, my own voice, and they were going to hear it. It sat on my kitchen table like a brick heavier than the weight it carried. There was no return address, no personal note on the front, just my name written in Mira's tidy cursive. I ran my fingers over the crease, then opened it slowly, like peeling back something I wasn't sure I wanted to see. The handwriting was familiar. The words were not. "We've decided to sign the new house over to you. If you want it, it's yours. We just want you to come home. It was the kind of thing I once would have cried over. Not now. Not anymore. I stared at the letter for a long time, not because I was moved, but because I was stunned by how they still didn't get it. After everything that had happened, they were offering me a house like it was a bandage. Like a deed could make me forget the years I spent being their emotional punching bag, their backup plan, their silent supporter. They thought this was about real estate, about financial fairness, about ownership. It wasn't. This had never been about the house. It was about how invisible I'd become to the people who were supposed to know me best. I folded the letter in half, set it on the counter, and walked away. Later that evening, I sat down at my desk and began writing my own letter. No fancy paper, just a regular notepad and a cheap pen. But the words I wrote were anything but ordinary. I don't want the house I began. Not because I'm bitter, but because I no longer want anything that's offered to silence me. I paused, let the pen hover above the page, then continued. You've spent years mistaking my silence for consent, my responsibility for agreement, my absence of need for lack of feeling. I forgive you for not knowing better, but I won't forget how it felt to be forgotten. I didn't write with rage, I wrote with finality. I don't need a place at your table anymore. I built my own, and it's filled with people who see me, not just what I can do for them. I signed my name, folded the paper, and sealed the envelope. No tears, no shaking hands, just breath steady and sure. On my walk to the mailbox, the air felt cold against my skin, but clean sharp like truth. I slid the letter in and let it go. Back inside, I made tea and pulled my laptop into my lap. I logged into the anonymous blog where I'd been sharing pieces of this journey, pieces of myself, and began typing my final post. Sometimes healing isn't about fixing what broke, I wrote. It's about realizing the pieces you're trying to glue back together were cutting you all along. I hit publish not because I needed to be heard, but because I'd already said what mattered to the one person who needed to hear it most, me. That night, as I was brushing my teeth, I caught my reflection and smiled. Not because I was happy exactly, but because I saw someone strong, someone who had stopped asking for space in a house that never made room for her. I dried my face with a towel, walked into the living room, and pulled up a travel app on my phone. There was a little Airbnb near the Oregon coast I'd bookmarked months ago. Nothing fancy, just a quiet cottage near the foggy mornings and sea breeze afternoons. I booked it for the weekend, just 2 nights a reset. Not a retreat, not an escape, a choice. And for the first time in my life, the only voice I needed permission from was my own. 2 months later, I found myself reaching for smaller mugs. Not because I'd downsized, though technically I had, but because I didn't need to overfill anymore. I poured just enough coffee into the ceramic cup I'd picked up at a flea market, one with a crack along the side that had been sealed with gold resin. Kintsugi. Beautiful, because it had broken. The apartment was quiet that morning. No phone buzzing with guilt-laced messages. No texts asking for just one little thing. The peace wasn't loud. It didn't shout. It just stayed. A steady hum underneath the stillness of my days. I was still working freelance consulting with a few new clients who valued boundaries as much as results. I spent my afternoons replying to emails, editing project timelines, taking breaks to water the small basil plant on my windowsill. A life not dramatic, not chaotic, but mine. One Tuesday, while I was slicing an avocado for lunch, my phone rang. It was Aunt Thalia. I hadn't heard from her in weeks. Her voice was warm as ever. "I've been meaning to call, just didn't want to stir anything," she said gently. Then added, "Lyra moved out." I leaned against the counter. "She's renting a little place closer to the non-profit she's working at. Says she's paying her own way now, no more favors." I didn't respond right away. Not because I didn't believe it, but because I didn't know how to feel about it. She say why I finally asked. Thalia sighed, said she needed to figure out who she was outside of what they wanted her to be. For a second, I stared at the blank wall in front of me. I thought of all the years I gave up, all the holidays I spent waiting for a version of family that never quite showed up. Some people learn late, but maybe what matters is that they learn it all. After the call, I opened my journal and wrote one line across the top of a blank page. They didn't lose me because I stopped caring. They lost me because they never truly saw me. I sat with it for a while, and for the first time in my life, I didn't follow it up with a but. No excuses, no emotional gymnastics to justify their behavior. Just a quiet acceptance that I could care and still choose to walk away. That weekend, I made good on the promise I'd written myself weeks ago. I packed a small, overnight bag, left my laptop behind, and drove to the Oregon coast. It was cloudy when I arrived, the fog brushing over the cliffs like an old friend. The Airbnb was modest, a cottage tucked behind a row of dune grass with chipped blue shutters and the faint smell of sea salt baked into the wood. The next morning, I stepped into a tiny used bookstore tucked between a coffee shop and a kayak rental. The bell over the door chimed softly as I entered. The floor creaked under my sneakers. A dusty shelf near the back held classics, and right there, wedged between two James Baldwins and a stack of forgotten cookbooks, was a worn copy of Little Women. I smiled. I hadn't read it in years. But I remembered how Joe March made me feel. Like strength wasn't just loud, but quiet too. Like choosing your own path wasn't rebellion, but survival. I bought the book not for nostalgia, for recognition. Back at the cottage that night, I walked the beach barefoot, the Pacific wind tousling my hair and the surf soaking my rolled-up jeans. I didn't take photos. I didn't need to prove I'd been there. This moment was mine. No applause, no performance. Just the sand beneath me and the sound of something being set free. I stood still for a while, letting the breeze press into my skin, and then I breathed. Deep, unapologetic. I didn't win. I didn't lose. I just walked away. And that finally felt enough. Sometimes the deepest kind of healing doesn't come from fixing what's broken, but from walking away with your head held high, knowing you did everything you could. Celine's story reminds us that love without respect isn't love. It's leverage. And being the strong one shouldn't mean being the silent one. Have you ever felt like the one who was always expected to give without question? Let me know in the comments. Your story matters too. And if this resonated with you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you won't miss the next story. Because sometimes the most powerful thing we can do is choose ourselves.